All right, we are back with another one of our company spotlight check-ins with Eric from KPMG, and we have Raj from Sage. Raj, tell us a little bit about what Sage does.
Yeah. Hey, Charlie. Eric, thanks for having me on. And so we started Sage about 5 or 6 years ago, based on personal experiences we had as a founding team with our parents and grandparents. And Sage really helps create a platform for keeping older adults safer with technology, both hardware and software, and using software to help caregivers understand what's really happening with their loved ones to give them visibility and also let professional caregivers take care of them. So really, we connect the older adult and the caregiver through technology.
So Raj and I met, I feel like right in the middle of the pandemic. So when you say 5 or 6 years ago,
So it was like the beginning wave. I think I remember it was towards the end of 2020, right as we were like figuring out what we're doing. We're doing a bunch of user research. We hadn't raised any capital, Charlie. I think it was probably like November, December of 2020 when we were
that
connecting.
that feels about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I had previously backed Ellen, your co-founder,
Yep.
for a company that she had built. And what was interesting and fun about that interaction is that what I have seen play out in this company totally aligns with what kind of a fundraiser you are. And that is, you come from a business background, you are a good negotiator, and this company is driven by partnerships with facilities. It's not necessarily a B2C company, and you're working with, these bigger enterprise deals. And typically my MO as an investor is get in early, get in fast, count on the fact that the founder doesn't love fundraising, and try and buy as much of the company as possible. And so I don't think there's ever been a process where I've been the first term sheet and been the highest term sheet. Last week, I did an interview with Zubin from Bridget, and I got outbid by DCM for their round. But luckily, I wound up getting into the round anyway. And he was poking at me for the initial pricing that I gave on their first round. But we went back and forth quite a bit and ultimately didn't come to a deal. But I've been following this company through all of your raises, kicking myself because you guys just raised $65
Yep.
million
That's right.
and have really knocked it out of the park so far. I would love to know, just looking back at that time, whether, like, what advice that you would give to people raising about holding firm and the negotiating process, because that first raise wasn't necessarily an easy raise, but you were determined to get the best deal possible. And I don't know if there's any moments where you thought it might not happen, but I'm curious because I never got the other side of that. I just got to see the success path that I regretted not being on.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, if you think about 2020, we were building a hardware software company, right? And now everyone likes those types of companies. As you know, most of the time during that period and even after it, most people didn't want to invest in a hardware software company. And for us, we had conviction that that was the type of company we needed to really line up with our mission. And so you're exactly right, Charlie. Like when we were first raising, and that was our first round, most investors sort of passed on us, like all early stage investors in New York City sort of passed on us because they said, hey, like I don't think that model works for us. And most entrepreneurs, I think, would look at it, you're in a pandemic, you are, trying to start this company. No one wants to sort of invest in this model, even though you have conviction in it. And I think that would cause a lot of people, including ourselves, to question, does this model make sense? Does what we're doing make sense? And is our approach right? And is it ever fun? And we ask those questions, right? We ask those questions because if you get passed on, you say, okay, should you do a different approach? And I think people like you were excited about the vision, but there are not very many people like you at that time. And so I had two options. One was like change my model and sort of adapt what I had conviction in to fit the mold of the majority of investors, or stick to our conviction and just do the hard work of finding the person and the people that would actually support our vision. And to be honest, we did that in many rounds. There's some rounds where, obviously we had a lot more interest than others. It varies. But what I found was you ultimately can find the person that has your vision and conviction, and you're probably better off taking your time to do that versus sacrificing the vision you have, because ultimately, if you get the people in for the wrong reasons, that won't be a great marriage going forward. And so for us, by allowing ourselves to take the time and patience, and then, by the way, I get it, in startup mode, you don't have time a lot of times, right? You're burning money, you have capital issues. Like, that is not a great time to say, I'm going to take time. But with urgency, and if you scope the market, like our first lead investor for that round was in Miami, right? And I had no network. I just ended up hitting the pavement and getting the right person who said, yes, I have a vision too. And I think this makes sense. And I think you guys will figure it out. So, long way of saying that I think that's been our approach, not just in that round and every round. It's like, find the person that believes in exactly the vision you have at the right terms that you expect. And it's not a straight line.
Yeah, that's a good story, and that belief in yourself is admirable, and I feel like that's a common thread when you hear stories of people that have been successful, right? They kind of kept to their convictions, stayed on track with their vision. So and maybe if we take one step back, Raj, could you talk a little bit about how you and the team came to focus on what Sage does, and that obviously you had that belief, right? But what was the backstory and why that?
And
Yeah.
especially, I would tack on to that, given that you were sharing you had some personal interest, the B2B focus versus B2C, I think would be interesting as well.
Yeah, totally. So our original thesis, so why I got excited to be on this journey was I've been in tech a long time. I was at different roles at Palantir, was in the founding team at Cedar, and then ultimately had personal experiences with my grandmother in the home with my parents, where she passed in 2019. She passed because of a fatal fall. So she was getting frail in any case, but she ended up having, you know, like a fall that where she fractured her hip. And it was a thing that we were avoiding, trying to avoid the whole time for about 5 years. We successfully did it until this point. And as a result of that fall and related complications, she passed away 3 days later. And reflecting back on that event and that sequence in our family's life, it felt like the caregiving journey just wasn't given enough resources from a technology perspective. Like, everything was manual. And so if I remember when my grandmother first started getting frail, the best solutions recommended to us by her doctor was a life alert pendant that was built in the 80s that called an ambulance. And they said you could retrofit a baby monitor to keep tabs on her. And now I put this person who literally raised me with a baby monitor that has background static that keeps my mom up at night all night. And that's the best we could do, right? And then as we have caregivers who came in the house, professional caregivers, they didn't have any workflow. There wasn't anything they were using to get dispatched by my grandmother to come to her attention when they needed, which is why there's a period of time where she had a fall and she wasn't seen right away. And all of that noise was only addressable if my parents were there in person all the time, right? Like, they were essentially managing the caregivers, they were overlooking my grandmother physically, and that's not sustainable. So two things happened. My grandmother still had the bad outcome despite our best efforts and resources, and my parents both burned out. So as I saw that, I said, technology is built for problems like this. Why can't we build better workflow? Why can't we have data around what's happening to give people visibility, whether you're a professional or the personal caregiver, to help these types of situations? That's why I got passionate. And then as I began on this journey, I had perfect timing, as Charlie knows. I started the company in earnest 2 weeks before the pandemic officially started, and had no expectation a global pandemic was about to hit us. And that's what I literally started the company in. And that was tough because you don't really know how to start a company during a pandemic. There's no playbook for it. And my first goal was, what do I actually do here? I have this thesis based on my personal experience, but is it a common thesis? Do people actually care about it? And so the first two calls I made were the best people I've ever seen who can design and build product, right? Because I said, like, I can't do this on my own. I'm gonna have to work with people that really care about this. I don't know who really cares about this, but hopefully they care about this. And we can work through what this actually looks like. And so I called Ellen, who Charlie knows, and back before, because I met Ellen several years before when she was selling that company that Charlie supported. And she was looking at different acquisition targets. And when I was a Palantir doing M&A there, we were basically going to acquire that company just because of Ellen's talent and how amazing Ellen is as a designer, product visionary. And I said, if anyone can design for caregivers and user experiences, it probably can be Ellen. And so when I called her, what I couldn't predict was the timing of my call with her. So when I called her, she was actually in and out of a nursing home. I had no idea. Her dad fell down a flight of stairs in his home in Syracuse, was completely his 80s, completely healthy before, had traumatic brain injury. And months prior to my call to her, and she had been in and out of post-acute rehab facilities in Syracuse. And when I called her with this hypothesis and this thesis, she was like, look, like you're preaching to the choir. I am literally in and out of these facilities all the time. It is a mess. She's like, it's really hard, Raj. Like, I don't feel like my dad will get proper care, not because people are not well intentioned. They're all nice people, but they don't have the tools to know what my dad needs unless I'm physically there advocating for him in that nursing home. So again, like some of this is timing, and you guys probably seen this with different startups. I couldn't predict that she was in this experience and cared about this. In the opposite end of aging, by the way, I saw it in the home. She saw this experience in the post-acute skilled nursing facility.
I'm curious about selling into that customer. One of the things that I think people don't always appreciate is the difficulty and the complexity around selling into a customer that isn't the CTO of Uber who was looking to token max, right? Who is more IT focused, not necessarily a fast buyer of the latest technology, and probably is somewhat skeptical, because I'm sure a lot of outsiders to those communities have come in and said, you need X and Y, and maybe has had implementations that didn't go well. So what did you learn about selling into this customer?
So as I jump into it, I'll just touch on the third leg of our stool because it ties into your question, Charlie. So my second call I made beyond Ellen was Matt. And Matt, I'd worked with at Palantir on healthcare deployments where we were selling into large enterprises in healthcare. And I needed someone to partner with from a technology build perspective that knew how to build for really large companies that had super unstructured problems that we could solve for. Like that was my foundational when I thought about selling into enterprise. You're not just selling a widget into these enterprises. So when I called Matt, again with him, his experience is a bit different, but he had 4 grandparents in assisted living, all had a bad outcome towards the end. And his view was if we had data around these folks earlier, we could intervene. And so he got really excited about that problem set. And so when the 3 of us came together and thought about the ICP who we're selling to, what we thought about wasn't, I'm building this widget and I'm going to sell into this ICP, because that doesn't work. We really thought about who are the people that we're selling into and what are their problems. And what we found, there was a few problems they were having at that time. One was resident safety. A second was turnover, which is still true today. And a third, especially during COVID, I mean, these facilities' margin literally got cut by half overnight. And so those were the 3 problems that we were looking at. And what we found was their workflow was terrible. They weren't pricing for the care that they were given. They weren't staffing appropriately to keep staffing ratios normalized. And all of the caregivers were overwhelmed and it was a chaos. And so when we walked into these facilities during COVID with our masks on, we said, how do we ladder up to those problems these C-level executives have while serving the consumer, which is the caregiver and older adults? And what was born was we were looking around the facility and we're like, okay, how do you care for these people? I use a walkie-talkie. How do they ask for help? Oh, they pull a cord somewhere in their room. What does that cord do? It sends a flashing red light somewhere. And we said, okay, so all of the data around what this person needs, what you're doing every day, how fast you respond is stuck in this like 80s system that's red lights are flashing, no one knows who's on it, and it's chaotic. Well, that seems like the intersection of resident safety, knowing how to staff these communities properly based on the activity happening and how much to price residents based on the needs they have. So if we can build a product that extracts that information and builds a workflow around something really bad, now we have a shot at producing outcomes that are interesting.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Tell me about how you're scaling. Like, what is the capital, is particularly this latest round of capital, enable you to do?
So, three main pillars. One is double down on what we do best and take over our current market. So, our current market really is what's called senior living, which is assisted living, independent living, and memory care communities. And they've, over 5 or 6 years, have now chosen our types of products as the gold standard. We do have competition. And so for us, we need to make sure that we are serving those customers, we're marketing to those customers best in class way so that we become the category leader. So a lot of what we're doing right now is investing resources, capital, and time to add on functionality to those customers, make their experiences from an outcome perspective even better, and really invest in the infrastructure we're deploying to them and the funnel of sales and marketing to make sure we're in every deal. So that's priority one. The second priority, as we were in these communities, we found out that they want a lot of things. Like we were one of the first people to put technology in their hands outside of the health record that was operational and quality. And as a result of that, they said, well, can you do more for us? And one of the use cases they asked us to do, which we accomplished, was using AI to passively monitor a room to detect distress without anyone activating any device. And that was something that honestly was timing. Like I think 5 years ago, technology wasn't in a place where we could do that. But 18 months ago, it was. And it's gotten even better. And so besides our passive devices that people are activating to ask for assistance, we're also now scanning a room every 8 seconds with AI to help them if someone's in distress as a caregiver way before that older adult needs any help and sort of circumvent the whole process of them struggling to get care, but we're predicting. And we're spending a lot of resources right now on those prediction models to help us understand things even outside of emergency events like falls, more predictive, like, hey, this person who's a mobility risk based on all of our data sets, and they're getting out of bed at 2 a.m., they're probably going to fall. You should go escort. That's where we're going. We're spending a lot of resources to do that because it's not a straightforward problem. It's a really challenging technical problem. So that's one area. The other area that we're spending a lot of resources on is workflow for the caregiver. So our goal is the caregiver only uses us. And so in order to accomplish that, we've integrated with every health record that's in this space in the country. And we're bringing in information the caregiver needs. So one is the care. So if I'm coming into a community, Sage is telling them all the needs of the resident in real time. But they also have to proactively address a care plan that person has every day. That is buried in EHR and it's not operational. So we're taking those tasks like, hey, you need to bathe Betty every day at 2 p.m. in Sage. It's also proximity. So when I'm walking by Betty, I know as Sage, I'm walking by Betty because I have the devices of the caregiver and I also have triangulation to the resident. And I'll say, hey, I know you see you walking by Betty. You should, escort her to lunch around this time based on her care plan. So I'm helping them be.
That's really cool. That's as somebody with my own experiences with, aging grandparents, et cetera. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing and give you guys a lot of credit for being the ones that are kind of trying to take the lead in applying technology in this space as you made several references to technology from the 80s kind of currently being used, right? I think people getting that daily just routine and not everybody was thinking about this. So super exciting what you guys are doing. Anything on the team front as we think about the new capital coming in? Any areas in the team that you're looking to build out or anything like that?
So last year we made some strategic bets right before we raised the Series C. One was investing in a marketing function, which we're scaling now. So we brought in chief marketing officer that ran the global brand for Lululemon and Galileo before. So again, like our world's interesting because we, as Charlie mentioned, we sell to enterprises, but we serve the consumer. So we have to educate both populations. And Carolyn had a really great background on consumer and healthcare enterprise that really fits our needs. So she's coming in and she's really investing team resources, we actually just launched our first caregiving summit. It's the only care summit built just for caregivers, and it's actually going to be in Brooklyn in September. And so we're actually bringing in 100+ caregivers from our sites that, according to our data, they're the best performers, and we're building programming around them. So super special. And beyond that, we spent a lot of time and resources on operations and sales. So as we've started growing, our infrastructure, as you're mentioning, has to scale. And so we brought in Kabir as our COO, who was at Coursera and helped them go public and really ran the global success and operations teams for Coursera. So we brought him in last year and he's doing great, really helping scale the teams. And then we brought in our chief sales officer right after the Series C closed. His name is Doug, and he was a toast, building up the enterprise sales team there from scratch to hundreds of millions as they went public. And so he came on board to really grow our enterprise sales team. So made a lot of strategic bets. We'll make a few more in the coming months, really investing in sales, marketing, and ops, the areas you'd expect for us to scale and grow.
It's really fascinating to hear that, 5 years ago, if somebody raised a big round, all you heard somebody wanted to hire was developers, developers, developers. And I don't know if it's a token to where AI has come and the efficiency of an individual developer and the ability to scale. But it feels like in some ways that's no longer the bottleneck for growth, at least from the human side of it.
I think it's a good point, Charlie. I think it can be. So we're fortunate. Ellen and Matt have such rich experiences in technology where it has never been really challenging for us to hire, retain, and scale engineering product teams because of their leadership. And that's been very positive for us as a business. That being said, over time, even in the last year, we did bring in VPs under them to really help support their scale as we were growing those teams. So, for example, on Matt's side, he brought in a VP and Greg, who was at Peloton and HIMSS and at different companies before with great experiences on the hardware and software side to really help Matt kind of scale the engineering team. And so while we never had a bottleneck like you're alluding to, we've been investing in it kind of readily over the years.
Gotcha. One last question before I let you go, and that's around location. You said you're having your summit locally here. Are you a locally focused team? Were you hiring wherever you find the talent, a mix of both? What's the geographic makeup of the team?
We've never compromised. And as you guys can understand, like going through 2020, a lot of people compromised on location. We never did. So we always, even in those years in 2021 plus, we always had an office in New York City and we continue to do so. 80% of our team today is in our office locally here in New York City and Flatiron. So like that's always been the case. We made a conscious attempt to do that. We just felt like even now as we're growing, we just move so much faster. And that's one of our differentiators. And so 80% of our team's here in New York, 20% of our team is distributed, large portion on the West Coast. And so we're actually going to create an office in the coming months in Los Angeles as a smaller satellite office, just because as a hardware software company, we found that in New York, one of the things besides our teams being here, clients love coming here because we have a special demo center for them with our hardware and software, and they can kind of immerse themselves. Well, it's really tough for someone in Oregon to want to fly 6 hours to New York. And so we're creating something similar in LA with a locally focused team there, much smaller, but a demo center there just to immerse our partners, regardless of which coast they live.
Cool. That sounds great. Well, we appreciate the fact that you're continuing to stay local. It's exciting to watch the growth of the company, and particularly in this area. I think I told you when we first met, my grandmother had taken a fall and stayed on her floor for a couple of hours because she did not want to push the life alert button for fear that the firemen would break the lock on her door. And she didn't want them breaking the door. So she just sat until the phone rang and she was able to sort of knock the phone off the hook and call for help. So she's very particular about her house. So, that was not the best trade-off in the world, but that's been there.
Yeah. I mean, I
You know?
would be too. Someone has living independently and now they're going through these, kind of dramatic changes in life. It's jarring and I wouldn't welcome it either. So we
Yeah,
have to sort of
yeah,
meet folks as they age where they are and hopefully do things in the background. It doesn't make them feel like, hey, my life's completely changed for the worse overnight.
right, right.
Totally agree.
Cool. Good luck, and thanks for spending the time with us.
Thank you, Charlie and Eric. Really, thank you for having me.
No
No
problem.
problem.
Congrats again.
Thanks, guys. Bye.